Thank you very much. The top stories this evening. David Walliams has been dropped by publisher HarperCollins amid allegations of inappropriate behaviour. The decision follows a Daily Telegraph investigation into claims that the children's author had harassed junior women during his time working with the company. According to the Telegraph, a female employee who raised concerns about Walliams' conduct later left HarperCollins after reaching a settlement, which included a five-figure payment. The publisher reportedly launched an internal inquiry in 2023 after a complaint was made interviewing multiple staff members who had professional contact with the author. A spokesman for HarperCollins told The Telegraph, after careful consideration and under the leadership of its new CEO, HarperCollins UK has decided not to publish any new titles by David Walliams. The author is aware of this decision. They go on to say HarperCollins takes employee well-being extremely seriously and has processes in place for reporting and investigating concerns. To respect the privacy of individuals, we do not comment on internal matters. GBNews has approached Mr Walliams for comment. East and West Sussex county councils have confirmed they will request a postponement to local elections next year, while two other counties have said they will not ask for a delay. It's after the government offered over 60 councils the chance to push back elections as part of reorganising local government. The Shadow Housing Secretaries criticised the Labour government as 10 million voters face having their local elections delayed until 2027. Meanwhile, the government have been accused of colluding with the Conservatives to prevent Reform UK from getting into power. But James cleverly told GB News the Conservatives are completely against it.
We absolutely should not be cancelling elections. What we've seen is the Labour government, both arrogant and naive and cocky, thinking they can completely restructure English local government all in one go. And of course, they've bitten off far too much. And what we now see in the opinion polls is that they are almost certainly going to have a really, really difficult night in those elections. And they've used their ineptitude as an excuse to hide from the voters. And it stinks, and we are completely against it.
Bridget Phillipson has been accused of blocking the publication of trans guidance that would force business and public bodies to protect women-only spaces. It's understood the Women and Equalities Minister has given a statement to the High Court describing the proposed rules as trans-exclusive and has failed to sign them off more than 3 months after receiving them. That's despite the guidance being based off the Supreme Court's ruling on biological sex. Former Strictly Come Dancing contestant Thomas Skinner, the BBC, claiming it rigged voting to get him off the show. The ex-Apprentice star says he has proof that the broadcaster downplayed his public support because of negative publicity. The 34-year-old was the first of 14 celebrities to be ousted in week 2 of the current series. Thomas is also boycotting tomorrow's final, in which he was due to return to take part in the class of 2025 dance. A BBC spokesperson told The Sun Strictly Come Dancing's public vote is robust and independently overseen and verified to ensure complete accuracy. The BBC's editing guidelines do not need to be altered in the wake of controversy surrounding the edit of a Donald Trump speech, a reviews found today. The BBC's Director of Editorial Complaints and Reviews, Peter Johnston, conducted a more detailed review of the Panorama programme, Trump a Second Chance. In his report published today, Mr Johnson said, "I was asked to look at the editorial guidelines on use of editing. I do not believe any changes are required, but we will ensure these lessons are reinforced." The US president claims the BBC edited his Capitol speech in 2021, making him appear to incite violence. And finally, in sport, YouTuber Jake Paul takes on Olympic and former heavyweight boxing champion Anthony Joshua in a few hours' time in a highly anticipated and widely criticised bout in Miami. Boxing promoter Frank Warren spoke to GB News ahead of the fight.
Money, that's why they're doing it. From AJ's perspective, he's getting a massive purse to fight a guy who's had 12 fights, fought nobody of any of significance, of a young fighter. They should not, take out a 58-year-old Mike Tyson. And, Jake's stepping up to the plate. He's the one who's stepping up. He's had 12 fights, no amateur experience. He's got, as I say, no names on his resume. Two-time world champion, big puncher, natural heavyweight against a guy who's heaviest he's fought has been cruiserweight, which is a weight below Olympic gold medalist. This is a big, big ask of Jake Paul, but you've got to take your hat off to him for stepping up to the plate against what I would say for him is a massively live fighter.
And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more from me in an hour.
Tune in to GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, on Nation Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Thank you, Tatiana, and welcome back to Jubes and Co with me, Miriam Kate, and joining me until 7 o'clock, I've got my panel, the pollster, academic and GB News presenter Matt Goodwin and Labour councillor Sebastian Salek. And of course, please do get your views in at gbnews.com/your say. We'll be reading those out throughout the programme. Now, our first story tonight, Labour Minister Bridget Phillipson is blocking the publication of trans guidance that would force businesses and public bodies to protect women-only spaces. She provided a statement to the High Court arguing that the proposed rules would unfairly exclude trans women. This is despite a landmark Supreme Court ruling that sex under equality law means biological sex. Ms Phillipson also claimed that the guidance could prevent women from taking their infant sons into swimming pool changing rooms, adding that there were many entirely plausible exceptions to single-sex rules. So let's bring in my panel. Sebastian, let's start with you. Now, the reason this guidance was written by the EHRC is because of this Supreme Court judgment that happened earlier on this year that clarified that under the law, sex means biological sex. What possible reason can there be for Bridget Phillipson delaying rolling out this guidance to public institutions?
I think it's the reason we're talking about it and the reason that anyone talks about it. It's really, really complicated. And whatever guidance gets issued, that's the guidance that is going to be used to enforce this. And they want to get it right, because the flip side is the government gets sued time and time again if the guidance isn't watertight, and that's going to lead to all sorts of headaches. So it's exactly the kind of issue you want to see a minister take a bit of time to think about, make sure they get it completely right before they then go and sign off the guidance. I don't think there's any blocking going on here. It's just a bit of prudence and a bit of thought going into this plan.
Well, I do actually think it's extremely simple. You're either male or you're female. If you're male, use the men's. If you're female, use the females. There's always been an exception for boys under 8 so that mothers can take their children in with them. That's always existed. Doesn't seem complicated to me.
What if you're a woman stood in a queue and you want to go and use the men's toilet? That seems to me like a very obvious thing to do. You should have the choice. Yeah, you should have the choice to be able to do it.
To go in, check there are other men in the toilets, get everybody out and go in. I mean, it's
but under these laws, it might not be allowed.
Which is incredibly crazy. Matt, what do you think?
Well, I think there's something interesting going on with the Labour government. On the one hand, we get from Jess Phillips and others that this is a government that's going to protect British women, protect British girls. On the other hand, this is a government, as we see with Bridget Phillipson, that is now going to allow, or seemingly wants to allow, biological males into women's spaces. Not only that, by the way, this is a Labour government that, as we've also learned this week, is going to be lecturing British schoolboys about misogyny and toxic masculinity, but at the same time has open borders, allowing unvetted illegal migrants in from the most misogynistic cultures on planet Earth. There's just a deep inconsistency within this Labour government about what it believes when it comes to women's rights. And if it really wants to protect women in this country, if it really wants to protect girls in this country, it would be following the judgment of the Supreme Court, saying the definition of a woman is biological, it would be fixing the borders, and it would not be engaging in this complete hypocrisy and inconsistency. That's all I see from this government.
I mean, Sebastian, it does seem like a very yes minister situation, doesn't it, when it's so simple what it means to have male or female toilets. How can it be that we've got this enormous legal wrangle and billions of pounds being spent on lawyers when it's generations and generations have known the difference between male and female?
But it's not simple at all, because there are so many people who feel confused about their gender. They feel like their gender doesn't match their sex, and we have to respect those people. We have to allow them to be who they want to be.
Why do we respect them as people, but why do we have to respect that point of view?
Because it's how they feel. It's the same as somebody saying, "Oh, I'm gay." We're past the era where you would then malign that person.
But if someone says to you, "I feel anorexic, I think I'm fat," to say, "I affirm you in that, stop eating."
I was having this debate with one of your guests the other day, and one is objectively false. If somebody has body dysmorphia and they think they're fat, but they're 50 kilograms, they are obviously not fat. But if someone comes to you and says, "I feel like I'm a woman, but I was born in a man's body," that is their view.
Objectively false.
Well, no, it's not, because it's their gender. Your gender is about how you feel. Your sex, objectively, yes, your sex is
gender is just
different.
a belief like any others, and you don't have to agree that that belief is credible.
Well, on that basis, we could break down all sorts of... We believe that companies exist. There's no... the whole society falls if you start to...
Let's get back to your point, Matt, about the violence against women and girls strategy, because it was delayed. Jess Phillips has been talking about it for a long, long time. It should have been released in the summer. It was rather underwhelming, wasn't it?
It was, but also fundamentally underneath it, I just don't believe the Labour government actually cares about this issue. Remember, this is a government that had to be dragged kicking and screaming into giving us a national inquiry into the grooming gangs, didn't want to get those girls the truth and justice they deserve, now talks about protecting British women and girls, won't fix the borders. We've seen hideous case after hideous case, yet still Labour won't do anything about it. I think fundamentally there's a mismatch between this kind of woke, radical, progressive worldview, which says, well, we care about women, we care about minorities, you know, we care about these things, we're very tolerant, we're very empathetic. But on the other hand, when Labour's consistently confronted with things that violate that, for example, you know, deeply unpleasant views within some minority communities, or the grooming gang scandal, or the need to fix the borders and control who comes in and out of the country, Labour just won't do it. It won't bring itself to actually do the things that would make a tangible difference to British women and British girls. And I just think that mismatch is so obvious now to everybody in the country. That's why Labour's finishing this year on 15% of the national vote. I mean, a lot of British women, a lot of British girls are looking at this government and saying, actually, they don't really care about women's rights, not really interested in the rights of women. And I think that speaks through the actions that the Labour government have pursued.
Let's talk about the other aspect of the violence against women and girls strategy, because the one thing that it did really major in on was teenage boys with misogynistic attitudes. And I think, you know, I don't think it's in dispute that actually there has been a rise in the kind of pornification of culture, some of the language that boys use, and 50% of child sexual abuse now is committed by other children. I don't think it's in doubt that there is a problem. But are anti-misogyny lessons and a helpline going to fix this?
I think it's part of the problem. I definitely think it should be, if it's not already mandatory in universities, I definitely think that's a point to tackle.
But can education, as in didactic education, telling boys to treat women differently, is that of any use compared to the kind of influences online,
it's all
influences in the home?
All part of the solution, isn't it? I don't think it's a silver bullet at all. You can't put people in a lecture hall, say don't abuse women and expect them not to abuse women. But you at least have to have that as part of the programme. You have to spell it out very clearly. What I would do with this issue is tackle it where it is most serious, well, like you would with any issue. And that is with British men, sadly. The majority of rapes and sexual assaults are committed by British men. And that's why, Matt, I really reject your way of setting this up as if this is an immigrant problem, for example. Yes, of course there are some immigrants who commit horrible sexual attacks, horrible rapes. But you want to go numerically where the biggest problems are, and that is with the British-born population.
OK, first of all, if we look at this per capita, we know...
Well, that's it. You're looking at it per capita. I'm not fussed about that. Because I'm focused on numerically the number of men who are out there. If I'm a woman walking alone at night, or with my partner, or whoever it is who's going to attack me, I'm not fussed about how many men there are per capita. I'm focused on how many men there are full stop.
OK, let's go back to statistics. You know, what you're talking about is the absolute number of people.
Correct.
What I'm talking about are the groups that are disproportionately most likely to commit these types of crimes. Now, I'm open to the idea that we should have a conversation in schools about misogyny. But how about this? When is the Labour government going to give us a national strategy on female genital mutilation? When are we going to get young children from minority backgrounds being taught that it's not acceptable to engage in those kinds of cultural practices? When am I going to get Jess Phillips on my TV screen saying we're not only going to roll out lessons on misogyny, but we're going to roll out lessons on female genital mutilation, cousin marriage, Sharia courts, etc., etc. When's that going to happen?
I think you hit on a really good point with FGM. That's an abhorrent practice. I'd like to see that outlawed.
So why isn't it being prioritised?
I have no idea.
I'm sorry,
not being enforced.
Anybody who has worked at a school in London knows full well FGM is going on in almost every school.
And that's a huge problem. We can definitely agree on that.
So why am I not reading about that? And why am I watching one documentary after another on Netflix making out that white working class boys are the problem in this country?
As the only woman on the panel...
Go on.
I think there's merit in what both of you say. So I think there is absolutely a problem with Islamic culture. And as a woman, knowing that a man has been brought up to think that women are not equal without the concept of consent, that frightens me immensely. Whereas I do know that most people with British heritage will at least have been brought up with the idea, the belief that women are equal. Of course, they don't always act that way, but at least that's belief. So that's the first thing. But also what terrifies me is the fact that the average age for a boy to view pornography is 11. And that, first viewing, and that most pornography is extremely violent, and we know from research that it is affecting what boys think about as as normal in sex, and 40% of young women have now been strangled during sex. That also terrifies me. So I think they are linked but separate problems that need separate strategies, but neither of those problems are identified in the Vorg strategy yesterday, which is equally frightening.
And there's a third issue here, and it's less of a political one and more of a cultural one, which is that we just don't talk about sex in the household. And I think this needs to change. I'm very lucky. I grew up in a household where it was spoken about very openly. I had very frank conversations from my parents, and I was told what I should and shouldn't do, and I really appreciated that. I know it's awkward. I know people don't like to do it, but I would love to see that change and people feel more comfortable and set them off on the right course.
And in the old days, if you didn't get that, there was a vacuum, whereas now there's pornography.
Completely right.
In that vacuum.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's right, but it's not either or. I mean, we are in a battle, whether the left wants to accept it or not. We are in something of a culture battle in this country. Call it culture war, whatever you want to call it. We have to actually get some of these conversations into the classroom about what our values are. Not all cultures are equal. We have a culture, and I would argue it's superior to other cultures. And we have to have a conversation within the classroom with our children about what's acceptable in this country and what isn't. For example, bullying school teachers is not acceptable, particularly when they're teaching about things like free speech. Female genital mutilation, not acceptable. Having 2, 3, 4 wives, not acceptable. I want to see Labour get its arms around that. I want to see the government say, we're actually going to tackle this head on. Remember what just happened in Australia. Now, when people are saying we're going to tackle the Islamification of Western societies, well, that's what it looks like. Responsible leadership is we're going to have a debate about this, and we're going to have a debate about how this is unfolding within the classroom.
Right, we're going to leave that there, because we've got plenty more to come on the show. Thanks, both of you. Don't go away, because coming up, a new EU loan secured for Ukraine, but it was celebrated in Russia. So we'll be debating, should Britain continue to support the Zelensky war effort? Don't go away.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dewbs, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power?
Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber.
Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics.
We'll see where this ruling takes us.
These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Jubes and Co with me, Miriam Cates, and keeping me company until 7 o'clock. I've got the pollster, academic and GB News presenter Matt Goodwin and Labour councillor Sebastian Salek. And you've been getting in touch with all your views. Keep them coming in, gbnews.com/your say. Women-only spaces, big topic of conversation. Pete says, how is Bridget Phillipson able to get away with ignoring the Supreme Court ruling? She's just virtue signalling. Paul says, the issue's not complicated at all. You're either a man or a woman biologically. Men should not be allowed in women's spaces. Well, I agree. Moving on now, though, EU leaders have struck a deal to provide Ukraine with a loan of €90 billion to plug its looming budget black hole. But the EU has failed to agree on using frozen Russian assets to come up with the funds, with member states fearing the legal recourse threatened by Moscow. Well, as talks went late into the night, Belgium, Italy and France began to work on Plan B in secret, using the bloc's unspent budget funds to underwrite a loan to Kyiv. But Hungary, Slovakia and the Czech Republic outright rejected this, and without the support of these Central European capitals, the loan would not pass. So EU leaders were forced to agree that these countries would have no financial obligation as part of the deal. Now, Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, said, we did not allow Europe to issue a declaration of war on Russia by using Russian assets. Meanwhile, over in Russia, the response was one of celebration, as Putin's special envoy for investment described the deal as a major blow to EU warmongers. Well, panel, is the consensus on Ukraine in Europe finally starting to shatter?
I think it is. We have not seen a unanimous decision here. Hungary, the Czech Republic, Slovakia making it quite clear they feel that, let's call it a sort of Western liberal elite within Brussels, are basically dragging us into a third world war. And the Hungarians are very sensitive to the direction of travel. They are basically saying, if you look around the people around the Hungarian leadership in particular, because they are the most influential within these countries, what they are basically saying is, look, if we'd gone ahead with this, you would be antagonising Russia to such an extent that there would inevitably be a blowback against Europe. And to be frank, A, they don't want to be dragged into a war with Russia. B, they're saying Europe is just not ready. And I think that's true. But also, I think there's a sort of, I don't want to say there's an amateurism around the European Union, but if you look at everything the EU has done since this war started, its decisions around energy markets, its decisions around economic policy, its decisions now around the loan, it has not projected itself as a cohesive, strong bloc. The Americans are fed up with Europe. Even Hungarians and Czechs, Slovakians, they're fed up with the European Union in Brussels. And I think they've just said, look, hang on, you're going to drag us into a conflict we're not ready for, we don't want to be involved with. What we need to do is get everyone around the table and say, look, we've got to come up with some kind of peace deal now.
Sebastian, Ukraine is still one of the least contentious issues in British politics, though. I mean, the vast majority of people, I think about 60% now, still agree that we should be sending aid to Zelensky.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I think there's a big parallel. I know it's a very tiresome, hackneyed thing to say, but it feels a lot like the Second World War and indeed the First World War, when we went to fight for countries that weren't our own, and we did it because that was our role on the national stage and it was our obligation. So I can completely see why and agree with the people who think that defending Ukraine is important.
You're right. I mean, the parallels with the Second World War have been used and overused. And I agree that there are moral parallels. There's an aggressor, Putin, Russia, and there's a victim. But that's where the parallel ends, because in 1939, we committed to total war against the Nazis, and in 1940 so did the Soviets and so did the US. Nobody now is willing to commit to total war. And we didn't win the Second World War because we were morally in the right. We won it because we had more men and more guns.
Sure, but the way this is developing is much more slow, it's much more piecemeal. It's Putin seeing what he can get away with, and we need to show him what the limits of that are, because if you allow him to take Ukraine, a European country, let's not forget, again, a really obvious point, but a really important one, where does that end?
But
You've got Finland up there.
190 billion euros, and 4 years later, nearly 5 years later, Ukraine's in a worse position than it was before.
Yes, but it's a war of attrition, isn't it? You have to grind down Russia. It's not going to have resources forever. Look, I want this war to end as much as anyone else, but I want it to end on the right terms. And I'm really, really concerned by people in Britain who say, let's just give Russia what they want. Let's allow them to take territory.
Well, nobody is saying, let's give Russia what they want. What people are saying is, this war has to end in some form. It cannot carry on for years and years and years. A, because we don't have the money. We just simply can't keep signing cheques of 90 billion euros every year. But also there isn't support for it. There's not unity within the European Union. We have to come up with something else. What President Trump is saying is a similar thing, which is you cannot just keep funding this war for the next 10 years. We're going to need a resolution to it. And I think the Hungarian position on this is really interesting. Don't forget, a lot of these Central East European states have also been deeply disillusioned by the European Union's position on a whole host of other issues, like forcing these countries to accept mass migration, and they've said, no, thank you, we don't want any of that. And there is now, I think, a real sense, particularly with Hungary, and by the way, don't forget, Viktor Orban is running for re-election next year, and now what they're saying is, look, if you carry on down this line, you're going to drag ordinary Europeans into a conflict that they never asked for to begin with. And we're not in 1939. There isn't appetite for that. There simply isn't appetite.
I just don't think any of that is very notable. I was a journalist for 7 years. A lot of that was covering the EU. I saw a lot of late-night deals. I saw a lot of things fall apart. I saw a lot of wrangling. That is ordinary fare for the EU.
Yes, of course. But what's the end game for Ukraine? Because Matt's just raised Viktor Orban. At the beginning of the war, he said that the fact that NATO is not ready to send troops, it's obvious there's going to be no victory for the poor Ukrainians on the battlefield. He was pilloried, he was called a Russian stooge. But he was right. If we're only willing to loan money to the Ukrainians to keep them going day by day, not give them enough to win the war, I mean, the situation's just going to get worse and worse. It's not pragmatic.
Yeah, look, I'm not a general, I can't give military advice, but I do think it is a war of attrition. I think you have to keep pushing until Putin says, I can't do this anymore. He runs away with his tail between his legs and he learns that this kind of thing doesn't work. It's about sending a message to Moscow, which currently we're doing. It's taking time, but look, he could have made a lot more ground than he has. Russia is not in a good place.
Now, let's talk about the politics in the UK of this, because certainly when the war started in 2022, Boris Johnson, who was then the Prime Minister, led the charge of supporting Zelensky, supporting the Ukrainians, and it was almost a unanimous political opinion that we should absolutely throw money at Ukraine. And even now, really, in polite society, that is perhaps the only point of view. Why have we found it so difficult to talk about this pragmatically?
I think because it's been a consensus view among the ruling class, the chattering class, the people that control the national conversation. There has been dissent around the fringes, but not a lot of it. It's just been considered taboo to say, like Viktor Orban has said, look, to be frank, this isn't going to go the way Western liberals think it's going to go, and he's been shown to be right.
But we know that the ruling class doesn't always set the agenda in Britain. Look at Brexit, for example. That was a massive uprising, wasn't it, really?
That's because we had a vote.
It's true, but the sentiment came from somewhere to create the environment for the vote. So it's not the case that the ruling class sets the political mood for the country.
The reaction to President Trump. Whenever President Trump has said, we need peace, everybody in Westminster, more or less, has thrown the toys out the pram, saying, how dare he say this, we've got to keep on fighting.
Peace on what terms? That's the crucial difference. We all want peace, but we don't want to give large land masses away to Russia.
But there's an interesting, Miriam asked about the domestic implications. There's something else that's interesting here, which is Labour is rushing, largely because of the influence of the Greens, to get back into the European Union, to try and do whatever it can to do that. Well, the big message from this, at least for me, is the European Union remains as divided and weak and volatile as it ever has been. It's divided north to south economically. It's divided west to east culturally and philosophically. It's a declining share of global GDP. It's not a strong bloc. It's not growing. It's not expanding. It's got a massive debt crisis on the horizon, like we do, by the way. And I just think all of this, again, is projecting this view that, you know, if the European Union was serious about becoming a major player on the global stage, as we saw with President Trump, it was pushed to the sidelines. You know, the imagery from the White House.
But hang on, let's just pause there, because you talked about the EU in really sullen terms. They got a deal last night. They did what they don't often do.
Three of their member states refused to sign.
Of course, because it's a massive bloc.
Wasn't it
You're always going to get some dissent.
Because what Ursula von der Leyen wanted was to use the seized Russian assets to give to Ukraine, but the Belgians, who don't normally rebel, but the Belgians were so terrified that the legal repercussions, that they would be on the hook for all these billions and billions and billions of dollars, that they wouldn't play ball. Then the Central European powers won't play ball. This is just a face-saving deal because they had to sign off something.
Well, they have signed off something, and it's 90 billion euros. It's not to be sniffed at.
But the Ukrainians needed 137 billion just to keep going for the next year. I mean, This is all supposed to be about giving Ukrainians sovereignty and independence. Well, they've lost that already. They're totally dependent on foreign aid.
Oh, they have been for the whole war, haven't they? But that's just the nature of being under attack. You're not going to be able to hold your own, especially if you're an economically weaker nation on the corner of Russia. But I think to draw the conclusion that the EU is some kind of weak bloc that's imploding and there's dissent among them isn't true. Brexit was a real warning sign, and a lot of people in Europe are a lot more happy now. You've seen a lot of the processes. You look at France, look at Greece, a lot of the countries we want to talk about leaving the EU, that really isn't a topic of conversation there anymore.
Can we just...
I'm sorry, you have people in Washington at the moment actively saying, as we learnt last week, they are prizing away, trying to try and prize away member states from the European Union because they feel that Europe is facing, in their words, rightly, civilizational
Matt, can I just ask you one more domestic question before we finish this topic? Nigel Farage is perhaps the only leader who has said anything more nuanced about Ukraine rather than just blanket support. And yet when he voiced those opinions, based on his considerable knowledge of history, actually he's got a strong interest in military history, he was absolutely pilloried, and potentially that's still hurting him now amongst some people. How can we hope to talk about this if the political consequences are so difficult, even for somebody like Nigel Farage?
It's deeply worrying. I think, you know, the word diversity is used a lot in Westminster, but what they mean by diversity is conformity. And the moment you step outside of the very narrow groupthink, like Nigel Farage does on not just this issue, by the way, but migration, crime, the economy, tax, you are vilified, because our national conversation, with the exception of this channel, I might add, and that our national conversation is so tightly controlled that you are simply not allowed to challenge the groupthink. And the moment you do, you're considered a pariah, even though what you're saying is often more sophisticated and more nuanced than what you'll get in SW1 Westminster.
I think that's fair.
I think there is a lot of groupthink in Westminster, but as we've seen from the rise of reform and the rise of the right flank of the Tory party, those views are becoming mainstream. You can say things like white culture is being erased in Europe and get away with it on national television now, and I find that really, really alarming.
In fairness, I said civilizational erasure, and that's what President Trump said.
Yes, but you've also talked about white people in the past.
Well, we are the home of free speech. Don't go away, because coming up, officials now expect 8.7 million Brits to be claiming welfare linked to a disability by the start of the next decade. But what will it take to get them back to work? Don't go anywhere.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries, all sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're contemplating a trip overseas at the moment, it is dry at first this weekend for many places, but low pressure will develop and it will bring increasingly heavy rain to many by the end of the weekend. We do have some rain to talk about. Parts of the south of Greece, southern Italy seeing that rain at first. Drier for the rest of Italy, dry for much of Iberia, but in between weather systems, a front pushing some rain into Portugal later. And then a developing area of low pressure will turn things increasingly wet across Italy and Greece.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good evening. This is your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now, for many, it is going to be a largely dry night to come, and with that, the potential for a bit of mist and fog to develop. And then, out in the west, there's a front that's pushing its way in, and that's set to bring some wet weather across western parts in particular as we go into tomorrow. Before that, though, as I mentioned, it is largely dry. Just a few showery outbreaks of rain across parts of Scotland and perhaps some western and southern counties of England and Wales, maybe a few pushing into parts of Northern Ireland too. Most places, though, having a dry night with clear skies, allowing temperatures to drop a bit chillier than some recent nights. Can't rule out a touch of frost and a few patches of mist and fog first thing tomorrow morning as well. Starting off tomorrow then, it is going to be a brighter story than some recent days this week. A few spots of rain affecting Orkney, a little bit of rain across some southern parts of Scotland as well, but mostly bright, although there could be some cloud around across parts of Scotland, and similar across Northern Ireland, just a few showers towards eastern coastal parts. More sunny skies for England and Wales. Like I mentioned, though, there will be a few pockets pockets of mist and fog here and there. Vale of York, for example, and other prone spots. Any mist and fog could take a little while to clear as we go through tomorrow, but it will eventually clear and lift away. And then apart from the odd shower here and there, for many it is going to be a fine day with some decent sunshine on offer. Just that front that I highlighted earlier on pushing into parts of the Republic of Ireland, Devon, Cornwall and South West Wales bring some wet and windy weather. Ahead of that, temperatures, well, they're a little bit above average for the time of year. Sunday looks set to be a cloudier day for many places. There will be a few outbreaks of rain here and there, nothing especially heavy for most places, just a bit grey, a bit damp at times, but worth noting could be some more persistent, perhaps heavy at times rain across parts of the southwest as we go through the afternoon. Into Christmas week, and it's set to turn drier, but also colder in time for the big day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Britain, for making us the fastest growing news website in the UK. We're truly humbled, and we couldn't have done it without you.
Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Drivers on the M4 westbound between junctions 23A and 25 should expect congestion. On the M1 northbound near Milton Keynes, a collision has left one lane closed. Devon's A30 eastbound near Launceston East is shut for road management, reopening by 9 tonight. In West Sussex, the M23 northbound exit slip at junction 10 has a lane closure due to a broken down vehicle. And on the trains, Greater Anglia has suspended services to and from Hertford East, while northern services face disruption between Lancaster and Morecambe. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Welcome back. You're watching Jubes and Co with me, Miriam Cates, and keeping me company until 7 o'clock, I've got the pollster, academic and GB News presenter Matt Goodwin and Labour councillor Sebastian Salek. Now, 1 in 8 people will be claiming disability benefits by the end of this decade. That's up from around 1 in 10 today, according to new government figures. Well, to break this crisis down, here are some of the shocking statistics. There are currently 2.2 million universal credit claimants who don't have to work because they have been assessed as long-term sick. That's a 7-fold increase since before the pandemic. This figure of 2.2 million excludes the million or so people who are currently claiming employment and support allowance, who will be moved on to universal credit later, and a further 300,000 people who are currently waiting to undergo a work capability assessment, which determines whether or not they will need to look for a job. So let's bring in the panels. Sebastian, let's start with you. I mean, it is an extraordinary rise that we've seen in disability claims. I mean, it's frankly becoming unaffordable, but the majority of the rise is being driven by mental health claims. Surely this should be easy to sort out.
Yeah, I think it's a real mixture. I mean, look, a lot of this came since the pandemic. Are we surprised that people are feeling worse since the pandemic? I certainly was, and I'm not surprised that people are feeling that they aren't able to go to work. Also really pleased. Real, then?
I think part of... think it's the way that people are claiming or the way that the system works?
I think there's always a tendency to say that people are trying to cheat the system, but honestly, I think it's real. I think a lot of people feel much, much worse. The thing that really jumps out of me from this is the ADHD part of it. And I think it's these things. We're all staring at our phones. We're all becoming very, very addicted to quick dopamine hits. I say this completely unscientifically. It's my own experience, really. And I'm not surprised that there's a link between that and needing constant...
Let's say you're correct. How is the answer to that, to pay people not to work?
It depends on who the person is. If you are somebody who is feeling a little bit sad, then it's probably not the answer. But if you are somebody who literally cannot get out of bed, and I've seen that in my own life, there are some people who are so unwell they cannot move. They can't go to work. They can't have a shower, let alone get out the door. And you need to support those people in the short term to get the help they need so then they can go back to work. Everybody wants to work.
Well, clearly everybody doesn't want to work. We've got 8 million working age people in this country who are on benefits. About half of those people are set to have no requirement to look for work. Are you honestly telling me, looking at the numbers today, are you honestly telling me that the 91,200 people in this country who are claiming welfare because they have ADHD are too unfit, too unwell to actually get a job, stay in work, contribute to the economy? Because I've got to be honest, and I said this a week ago, I don't know why I'm working so hard in this country, because we are now spending crazy amounts of money. According to the Office for Budget Responsibility, the total cost of disability benefits in this country is on course to rise to £109 billion by the start of the next decade. £109 billion. That's as much as we're spending on our debt interest in this country, OK? So why am I getting up as one of the millions of people in this country every day, working hard, paying taxes, contributing to the economy, supporting the country, when we've basically got millions of people now on welfare benefits with no requirement to look for work, not to mention, by the way, the hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants coming into the country, who I'm also having to bankroll because they're costing $15 billion, OK, on top of 10 to 12 billion on foreign aid, sending condoms to Pakistan. Why am I working so hard?
Let's start with where we agree, and I think that's that the benefit bill is too high, and it doesn't benefit anybody. If you are paying those taxes, not great. If you are receiving those, not great either. Those people want to be in work. People who come on this channel and talk about it, they want to be in work. The ADHD figure is interesting, the 90,000 you cited. You assume that these people are out of work. We don't know that. The story doesn't tell us that. But your big question is around why are you working so hard? I can only tell you why I'm working so hard. It's because I want to do it. I want to earn money, I want to do things I enjoy, and I want to pay back and pay taxes that will help this country.
But I think what Matt's getting at is that the higher the taxes go up, and the more you think your money is being wasted, the less incentive to work hard. I think that's something that a lot of people can empathise with.
Yeah, no, look, that is fair, but that comes back to the point we agree on, which is that the benefits bill is too high.
Can we come back to your ideas about ADHD and this rise being real? And one of the reasons why I just don't think that's true is because if you look at the rest of Europe, who had very similar experiences in the pandemic, this hasn't happened.
That's really interesting.
And the reason it's happened here is because we are the only country in the Western world that treats mental and physical health problems the same. And in the pandemic, we started taking over-the-phone referrals rather than in person. Those two things, in my mind, completely explain this rise, plus the fact that there are TikTok videos out there telling people what boxes to tick to get money for ADHD.
I think we're going back to in-person assessments, which is really positive. I think that is important. You have to be able to, if you're going to look at someone and say, you are too ill to go to work, you have to see them in person. I watched some of those TikTok videos earlier. They're really interesting. And when you read about them in the Mail or wherever, it feels like it's someone saying, here's how you can cheat the system. It's really just saying to someone, here's what benefits you're entitled to and here's how to claim them. And there are council-run services. Well, one is, here's how you can cheat the system and here's how you can get what you're entitled to. And there are council-run services in many parts of the country which teach you to do exactly the same thing. Because if you're entitled to something, you should be able to get it. The barrier shouldn't be not knowing it exists or not being able to use an online form.
The point I was making was not about TikTok videos, right? You're always going to get idiots who are encouraging people not to contribute to their country on social media. The point I was getting at was about the social contract. It's not just that we're learning this week we're going to be spending £109 billion on this welfare regime. It's that we're spending £10 billion a year on welfare benefits for people who are not even British.
Oh, Matt.
No, let me finish. You've had your bit.
It's the third segment, and you're bringing immigrants into everything.
Sebastian.
It's genuinely impressive.
Can we stick to the mental? Because I agree that that's important.
Miriam,
no,
sorry.
No, I'm the chair.
Well,
I agree that's
Well, apparently
important.
I don't get any time on the show because Sebastian's just had a lengthy monologue.
Well, we can go back and measure the time if you like, but I do want to stick to the mental health because I agree with you that benefits for foreign people is a problem, but I want specifically to talk about...
Well, if I could finish my point, it wasn't just about that. That's not just... I was making a point about the social contract in this country, which is broken on multiple flanks, one of which is the disability benefits. I don't understand why people out there are working so hard to support people who have no requirement to look for work. I don't understand why millions of people in this country are being forced to pay billions of pounds a year in foreign aid while British people are being treated in corridors and car parks. I don't think that's fair, and I don't understand why we're being forced to pay £10 billion a year in welfare benefits for people who are not British. That is how the social contract collapses. That is how the social contract collapses.
It's so tiresome.
This is why Labour's on 15% in the polls. You do not put the people in this country
as much as you.
It's not about hating immigrants.
It really sounds like it.
It's about...
It really sounds like it.
It's about asking people to contribute to the economy.
Let's go back to disability benefits. I think the fundamental disagreement here between left and right is that the left think that people will fundamentally behave well and therefore, given freedom, most people will make the right choice. Whereas I think those on the right would say that actually boundaries are very important and if there are loopholes, people will always exploit them. So my position would be, if you make it very easy to claim benefits with no checks and balances, people will do it, whereas perhaps your position is a bit more generous.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I tend to be more optimistic and more trusting, but you're right that there are always going to be loopholes that we have to close, and that's why we talk about assessing people in person, and we agree on that. It's really important that you make sure that someone isn't phoning up and saying, I'm disabled, and you're saying, well, have a load of money. That's obviously not the way to do it. But if you are genuinely disabled, you should be supported by the state. It's just something that we owe our fellow citizens. They didn't choose to be disabled, and it happens to be incredibly expensive, and I'm very happy for my taxes to go to people less fortunate than me in that sense.
Matt, how politically difficult is it going to be to row back on this incredibly expanding welfare state?
Well, it's going to be incredibly difficult because the Labour government has said it won't even look at very minor welfare reforms. The only party that is serious about reforming this welfare regime is the Reform Party, which has laid out substantive changes to the welfare regime, beginning with stripping away minor or mild mental health conditions as a reason for claiming welfare, and has also said it will restrict all welfare benefits in this country to people who are from this country, because these are the people who built this country. That's how, and that is how a social contract
I'm going to take the bait. Let's talk about immigrants for a bit. Do we have time? Do we have genuinely?
No, we don't really have time.
Let's not talk about immigrants.
We have done lots on immigration. We will do it again. I think this is a very interesting issue, particularly because we are so outliers in Europe on this issue, which makes me think it is a problem that can be solved. Well, coming up, why are HR departments stealing Christmas? Find out after the break.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, this is Jubes and Co with you.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here. GBNews,
Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GBNews family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dewbs, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, DC.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Jubes and Co with me, Miriam Cates, keeping me company until 7 o'clock. I've got pollster, academic and GB News presenter Matt Goodwin and Labour councillor for Waltham Forest, Sebastian Salek. And it's Friday night and it's nearly Christmas, so we're in the Jubes Tavern with a much-needed drink. So hope you all have a great weekend, last one before Christmas. Probably lots of people out there wrapping presents. It would help if I'd bought a few. But anyway, let's move on to our final story, because here at GB News we have given the studio a festive makeover. Some of our guests try to steal the baubles, but that hasn't happened tonight, I can assure you. But has equality and diversity stolen Christmas from your workplace? Well, recent headlines have revealed that HSBC banned staff from wearing Christmas jumpers in customer-facing roles, while the DVLA went one step further and actually cancelled its free vouchers for Christmas dinner. Matt, is this a real thing? Do you think people really are cancelling Christmas, or is this just kind of cost-cutting?
I think there is an ongoing assault on the identity, culture and history of our country. I think that's pretty obvious to everybody who's lived in this country for a few years. It's not just symbols of who we are in terms of Christmas. We are still fundamentally a Christian nation. It's also, I think, an attack on how we understand our history, how we think about our values, our way of life, and how we teach and pass on those things to our children. So on the one hand, this stuff might seem quite frivolous, but it is a reflection of the ongoing culture war, what Roger Scruton called the culture of repudiation, that now dominates the institutions in this country.
Sebastian, what do you think? Christmas jumpers, should they be allowed at work?
Oh, I think we should ban Christmas jumpers just because they look awful, not for any other reason. I mean, look, if HSBC want to ban them in customer-facing roles, I think that says more about how they want to present to customers than their views on Christian winter festivals. This is a story that comes around every year, isn't it? There's always something.
But I do think there is a point, because it seems to me that HR departments in particular are actually looking for ways in which people might take offence. And actually, people from other cultures don't take offence at Christmas. They know that they live in a country that celebrates Christmas. I think it's more the HR departments, the kind of wokerati, who want to avoid any sort of offence. They don't like fun.
It's a seductive setup. I've just never seen it myself. I've worked in a lot of companies. I've never seen that draconian HR manager who wants to kill all the fun. And look, I know they make a great target for your average Telegraph reader where we got this story from. There is a wider point, isn't there, around Christmas and becoming a more secular country, and that is true. We are becoming less religious, but as that happens, Christmas morphs and it becomes a slightly more secular celebration as well. It becomes about time with friends, and it becomes about presents and food and all the great things that come with Christmas. You don't have to set foot in a church. I choose to. I'm not a Christian, but I like going to a service, and there are the middle grounds as well.
It does sadden me in this country that it's not just Christmas. We don't have many communal celebrations anymore. As you go to countries, particularly in Eastern Europe, they still take these national festivals very, very seriously, and it's a point of commonality that we just don't have anymore.
Well, so do Germany and France, of course, as we've seen with the Christmas markets in the last 2 weeks, where they've been attacked and invaded by Islamist mobs and people who are not from those countries, but I might not be allowed to say that. But then if you look at the symbols of who we are in Europe, the fact that actually people are trying to project and defend their civilization, those moments are incredibly important. Those viral videos.
We're going to have to go there. I'm so sorry, Matt, because we are reaching the end of the hour. HSBC do say that they are interested in not telling people to wear Christmas jumpers, they're just trying to be sensitive. And the DVLA said that they're not anti-Christmas, but they just want to be consistent. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'll be back on Monday morning with Andrew Pearce, but have a great weekend.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good evening. This is your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now, for many, it is going to be a largely dry night to come, and with that, the potential for a bit of mist and fog to develop. And then, out in the west, there's a front that's pushing its way in, and that's set to bring some wet weather across western parts in particular as we go into tomorrow. Before that, though, as I mentioned, it is largely dry. Just a few showery outbreaks of rain across parts of Scotland and perhaps some western and southern counties of England and Wales, maybe a few pushing into parts of Northern Ireland too. Most places, though, having a dry night with clear skies.